Hello, you motorcycle maniacs. Today, we're going to assemble the carburetor of the Suzuki VS850 Intruder together. We've got a 96 model on the table, and before we get started, I'll show you what tools we'll need. We'll need a Phillips screwdriver in sizes PH2 and PH1. I've also got various flathead screwdrivers here on the table. A small, powerful flashlight. I've got an Allen key set here, because Allen screws have already been installed here. We'll need some silicone spray, a thin fuel hose, an open-end ring spanner in 6 and 8 mm, and then I've also got a pair of needle nose pliers and combination pliers here on the table. And of course, we've already got 2 repair kits here, and 2 new air cut membranes will also be installed. One more important note, please make sure to take a quick look at the video description. If I forget to mention something or if any new information about your carburetor comes up later, I can add it there. You'll also find in the video description an email address for a professional to whom you can send your carburetor for ultrasonic cleaning. Another question that comes up a lot, does the carburetor guy actually make money from this? Here's the cool part. If you buy the repair kits from the affiliate links in the video description, you support our channel's maintenance and growth. Plus, you get a shop with fast shipping and fantastic reviews. Alright friends, before we really get started, let's check a few things here for flow. For that, I've got this hose here. One end goes in my mouth and the other end I attach right here. I'll show you this with one example, and then I'll show you where else you need to check it. This channel here is where the choke gets its fuel. Yep, you can really hear that clearly. And please do the same thing at this spot. There's a small opening there. Then please check in here. There's a jet in there. So again, place the hose flush against it and listen to see if there's a passage. Then please check this opening up here. And then there are 2 more up front here. This one and this one. Let's get started with assembling the mixing tube. If you take a look inside there, you'll see this little notch. The mixing tube has to be threaded in from the other side here, but the notch is important because the mixing tube has a groove here, and that has to line up exactly where the notch is. So you basically have to thread it in the right direction. I'm going to turn it the right way now, and then you place the carburetor like this, because from here you can thread it in, so to speak. Here's the groove, and on this side is the notch, so I'll thread it in here. And when it's positioned correctly, it can snap in completely and slide through. If the groove isn't where the notch is, it won't go in all the way. I'm holding it down here with one finger, and then this little brass screw goes on top. It's a 6 mm hex head. This holds everything in place here, so that's what we'll start with. I'm tightening it now. When tightening the screw, remember that it's only a small thread and also a pretty soft material. So please don't overdo it. This tab and the notch are there so that it doesn't keep turning, so you don't have to hold it in place, since you can't really get in there. Next up is the float needle valve. That's located here. Now, here I have in total. I've sprayed all the mounting openings with silicone spray, so here as well as here, where the main and idle jets go. I've also sprayed the float needle valve, the inlet part, since it has an O-ring here, so that it slides in smoothly. Please position it here, and then with a bit of back and forth movement, I'd almost say you gently massage it in. Please, no brute force. So it's in place now, and it's secured by a small Phillips screw with a wide collar. That's this one down here. It basically has a large washer attached to it. And right here next to the float needle valve, I'll show it again. Here's the thread for that screw. And the screw ensures that the float needle valve, meaning this inlet part, stays in its position and can't slip out. In the next step, I'll install the main jet. It sits here on a hex holder like this. This goes onto this little tube here and is screwed in place. You'll need an 8mm open-end wrench, and then you can tighten it here. Here's the same tip. Please don't overdo it. Soft material, small threads, so no excessive force here. Just tight enough. And since the repair kit comes with a new main jet, you can hold it here and unscrew the old one. I've already loosened it beforehand. Alright, now the old main jet can go, and we'll screw in the new one here. And then, right here, the idle jet goes in next. Oh, sorry, I just bumped the camera. So, the idle jet is this one right here. We also have a new one included. It gets installed right next to it, exactly at this spot. Please make sure to use a properly fitting tool here so you don't damage the slot. With brass, that happens quickly, and then, of course, that can cause problems later when you try to unscrew it again. Alright, that's done now, and then we'll move right on to the float. Let's continue with the float. The float has this little metal tab here, and we hang the float needle valve onto this tab. It has this little wire here. You thread it through here. There you go. And then onto here. Then it hangs on there. And now you can tilt the carburetor a bit, because the float needle valve has to go into this inlet part here. It's a bit tricky to thread it in here. There, and make sure it doesn't fall out. And now the float is secured with this little pin axle. Please make sure that it's really clean. It has to move very, very smoothly. Please don't use force here. Don't press it in with pliers, otherwise next time you'll have a big problem getting it out. Alright, I need to get this into position. 1 second. As always, you'll find the values for the float level in the video description. This is very, very involved with the VS800 because there are so many different model years with different carburetors and therefore different float levels. I'm trying to summarize it. Can you add anything to this or do you see anything wrong? Please just leave a comment and let me know. Alright, we're done here. The cover can go on now. We've already put a new gasket in the cover here. Of course, that was included in the repair kit. The cover goes on like this, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 screws here again. You probably have Phillips head screws. I already have Allen screws here. That's how I got the carburetor. I'll screw this on now, and then we'll continue. Alright, let's continue with the air cut valve. That's this one here. We've got a brand new one here. I sprayed everything beforehand with silicone spray, the valve and the seat. This goes in here. This little tab needs to sit over here. Please make sure that it's sitting properly in this groove, or at least positioned so that it slips into the groove when we put the cover on. Now, this small but strong spring goes on here, and then the cover. This tab here on the cover needs to go over this part, where the diaphragm has this extension. You really have to press down quite firmly. Please make sure, you can feel it pretty well, that the tab on the diaphragm also slips into this groove. And then there are 3 screws here, 1, 2, and 1 more back here, 3. You screw those in, and then we move on. I've already installed the needle here in the slide, but a new one is included in the repair kit. I'll show you how that's done again on the second carburetor. That's also where I showed how to take it apart. Now, please make sure to notice that the diaphragm has a little tab here. And there's a notch for it right here. On this one, it's even marked with a little brass too. On the second one, it's just indicated. So, now you put the slide in here, and you have to make sure that with the part load needle at the bottom, let me show you, that you also hit the jet holder, or in other words, the atomizer here. Hang on, I need to wiggle this in a little bit. So, that's where it needs to go in. Of course, I sprayed everything with silicone spray beforehand. Now, I turn the diaphragm like this, so that the tab sits in the corresponding notch here. Just a little bit more. And then the edge here needs to be fitted into the groove of the carburetor housing. It has to fit properly here. If it doesn't fit, you'll also find the suggested solution in the videos. What can you do if the diaphragm has dried out and has shrunk a bit as a result? And now the big spring goes in here. It just sits in here loosely, so please be careful when putting the cover on. This one here has a little notch right here. It needs to go on this side, where the tab on the diaphragm is as well. So this part goes right over here. And with the spring, please make sure it doesn't get jammed, and that you insert it as far as possible down into the slider. This little tab up here in the cover is supposed to hold the spring in place so it doesn't slip. And then carefully mount the cover. If you don't do that, the spring might get stuck and the slider won't move smoothly. So, now again, hold it steady. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. You screw those in, and then the cover is on. After screwing them in, make sure to check how the slider moves. Yeah, is everything here moving freely? It's also normal for it to come down a bit more slowly like this. That also means the diaphragm is intact and properly seated everywhere. If you take a look in here, there's an air jet that you can unscrew. That was actually included as a new part in the repair kit. The contents of the repair kits always vary quite a bit. So of course I'll unscrew it and install the new one. Please be very careful here as well. Use a properly fitting screwdriver, apply a bit of downward pressure, and give it a slight twist when loosening it. It's actually just a really, really tiny jet. I'll just let it drop out here. That's the one. That's the old one, and right next to it here is the new one, which I'll screw in now. And then, in the final step, all that's left is to install the idle mixture screw. So, last step, the idle mixture screw, which is this one here. Here you can see it by itself again. This is the correct assembly order. The screw itself with the tip, then a spring, followed by a washer, and finally an O-ring. Here I've already assembled it, and when you install it now, it goes in here. There's a mounting opening for it right above the throttle shaft. It's best to position the carburetor so that you can install it horizontally. Because if the washer and O-ring slip off, they'll end up sitting at the front and could get jammed. So I basically insert it here as horizontally as possible. Like this. And then screw it in. You know, screw it in all the way until it stops, and then back it out a certain number of turns. I'll try to note the correct number of turns for different model years in the video description. Please be careful when tightening it, don't over-tighten. If the little tip breaks off and gets stuck in the carburetor housing, then you no longer have a carburetor, you've got yourself a fancy paperweight. That's the risk you're taking. At best, there's a 50-50 chance of fixing it. So, with this carburetor too, we take the small hose again and blow air through it to check if it's clear. This little tube is the fuel riser for the choke. I put the hose on here and blow through it. Alright, that works. And I'll show you the other spots where you should try the same thing, specifically right here at this point and at this spot, then up here. Right here, right now, at this very moment, right here, right now. Air needs to pass through all of these, and then we can start with the assembly. Here, we also start with the emulsion too. Here too, there's a groove in the material, a flat spot, you can see it there. And here you can clearly see from the outside that at this spot, that little tab is sticking in. You can see the small brass part there. Turn it again so that you can thread it in from above with the pliers. And already hold the jet holder so that it roughly lines up with the direction of that groove. Now carefully thread it in here. Please don't use any force. And if it's properly aligned, it will slide right in. No, it's not properly aligned yet. Now you see, it goes all the way up here, and it doesn't slip back down when I let go. Yeah, do you see that? It would slip out. So, let's start by installing the main jet first. The brass washer, which we mustn't forget, is included as a new part in the repair kit. And there's also a brand new main jet here. We screw it in here, and that already secures it from falling out again. Alright, now it fits in place. Great, it can't twist anymore. That's what this little tab in the material is for. Just tighten it up, and then we'll move right on to the float needle valve. Here we have the new float needle valve. I've sprayed it thoroughly here with silicone spray. Of course, the mounting opening as well. You can see this O-ring here on the side. We mustn't damage it. So, just like with the other carburetor, position it and use gentle movements here. Carefully apply pressure. There, now it's in place, sitting flush with its seat. And to keep it from slipping out, there's also a little, let's take another look, a little screw with a really wide flange, kind of like a washer that's attached to the screw and that holds the float needle valve in position. Hold on, I need to turn this a bit so you can see it, but I also need to watch what I'm doing here. Alright. Tighten the screw. Remember, it's a tiny screw, soft material, so please don't overdo it. Now we can go ahead and install the float. With this carburetor. This round one here. On the float, you have this little tab. Yep, you can see it there, and onto this tab we thread. The float needle valve with its little wire clip, so that in the end it hangs here freely and can move. And we still need the pin. Please check that beforehand. The pin goes in here, and specifically from this side. It won't work from this side because the fitting here gets in the way, and it needs to go in smoothly. So if it doesn't go in smoothly and you can't easily thread it in and out here, please check again whether the pin got properly cleaned in the ultrasonic bath, whether both openings are clean, and whether it's not bent. That actually happens pretty often, and then it gets stuck and you can't assemble it. So, the float needle valve needs to go into its inlet part here. And once that's done, this little pin here can be installed, which holds the float in place as its axle. Alright. Get everything into position. Exactly, and it needs to slide in just as smoothly as that. You can find the float level in the video description. And then, in the next step, we have here from the repair kit. The brand new idle jet. This goes in here. I'm just going to drop it in here now. Please use a screwdriver that fits well, otherwise you can easily damage this small slot in a soft material. And getting it back out of there is a really tricky task. So, don't tighten it too much. Then, of course, we have a new gasket here that we're going to use. Alright, the small tube for the choke gets threaded in here. Yeah, and now the lid can go on. Oh wait, hold on, I forgot something. Really, really important. With this lid, you need to check. Do you see that hole down there? There needs to be a passage from there to here. So please either put the hose on here again or shine a light through it. Let's take this little flashlight and I'll try to show you so we can see it. There, now you could see it. Right down there is a tiny little jet. Do you see it? And that controls the fuel supply for the choke. It has to be clear, otherwise the choke won't work. Alright, and this channel gets placed onto the small brass tube here. So, and then the 4 screws go in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we move on. Alright, next step, the air cut valve gets reinstalled. Here too, I sprayed everything thoroughly with silicone spray. The new valve is installed here, and you can see, this one also has that slightly extended. The tongue has to be placed exactly into the groove here. Here we have spring. And on this carburetor, there's a plastic cover here. To be honest, I don't even know why there are 2 different covers used here. Maybe something was changed here at some point. It's quite possible that yours looks a little different, but the operating principle is the same. Now, 2 screws go in here, while the other one had 3. Maybe you actually have a different cover with 3 screws for fastening. So, here you really have to hold it firmly, because the spring has quite a bit of force, so screw it in tightly, and then I'll show you how to install the needle in the slide. We did that during this assembly on this carburetor, and now of course I'll show you how to put it back together. Alright, let's get started. You can see 2 openings down there. The larger one is for the part load needle, the smaller one must stay clear. The smaller one is where the vacuum comes through the diaphragm. We'll start with this spring here. The spring goes into this opening here. It's really, really hard to capture on camera, but in this large hole, there's basically a recess. Maybe we can try to show it as well. Yeah, there it is now. You can see it. I'll move it a bit. The spring is sitting in there. Great, fantastic. And now I'll take the needle, again using the needle nose pliers. The needle is installed. There's a washer underneath here. Here's the clip that determines the position of the needle. And on top of that, there's a nylon washer. This is the correct one. Assembly order, and now I'm trying to hold it in such a way that I can thread it in without the spring falling out. You can see it like this. Very nice. I carefully folded the diaphragm down, so now I have space here. So, and now I'm pulling a bit on the needle. We need to make sure that I can move it down here, so to speak. I have to hold it down here. Please don't bend it. And now the small retaining plate has to go on. The retaining plate has holes here and here for the screws. And this cutout here needs to be where the hole is that has to remain open, so that the vacuum can also reach up here, above the diaphragm. So, very important about this washer, you really need to pay attention to this. Right there at this spot, you can see, yes, you can see, there's a very small indentation, and on the other side, there's a tiny tab sticking out. The tab has to point downward, and the indentation has to face upward. Otherwise, the spacing between the screw holes and the opening for the hole that needs to stay open won't be correct. So that's really important. Now I'll thread it in, and then we'll continue. That's how it should look, folks. The 2 screw holes are now, basically this one and this one here, that needs to stay open. Nothing should go in there. And now you have the honorable task of putting in those tiny little screws there. That might work pretty well with a magnetic screwdriver, or you can do it like I do and use needle nose pliers to set them in place. I can't show you that right now, because we can't film here at the same time, and I can reach it with the pliers. It's a bit of a fiddly job. You can do it. Just a little patience and a steady hand, not like me right now. And then it works. We'll continue in just a moment. This is what it looks like once it's mounted. I probably had 1 cup of coffee too many today, that's why my hands were shaking just now. Yep, that's how it should look, and now let's move on. I'm working on the diaphragm, carefully folding it back up here. Now the slide gets sprayed with silicone spray again. And then it goes right back into its place. So, threaded in from above, you can see the atomizer head down there again. That's where the part load needle needs to go. So you can just look from the front here to make sure you thread it in correctly. If it doesn't fit, the needle is a bit spring-loaded there and can move to some extent. Then just very carefully use a pair of needle nose pliers, really carefully, please don't scratch anything, to help guide the needle. Alright, and now you need to check up here again. This diaphragm has this little tab here, and there's a matching notch for it right here at this spot. That's where you turn it to. Then the groove of the diaphragm, meaning the edge of the diaphragm, needs to be fitted into the groove of the carburetor housing, so it has to be placed in there properly. Make sure that it's seated properly all the way around. Once it's sitting right, take the spring and, just like with the other carburetor, before you put the cover on, press as much of the spring down here as possible. Otherwise, it can get jammed here. By the way, this cover doesn't have a notch like the other one, so you can just put it on directly. Also, under this little tab of the diaphragm, there's no tube, so just put the cover on. This tab here in the cover acts as a lock for the spring, so the spring can't slip out of place. Of course, there's a right and a left side here too. Sorry. So, the cover is on. Please, once the cover is on, hold it in place. And now, from the front, just check it as a test. Does the slide move properly? Yes, it does. Alright, put in screws 1, 2, 3, and 4, and let's keep going. Now it's time for the mixture screw. This is what it looks like fully assembled. Here again, step by step, the order, the screw itself, the spring, the washer, and at the very front, the O-ring. This will also be installed here on this carburetor. This mounting opening is above the throttle shaft. And here too, I position it so that I can assemble it horizontally, so to speak. Please be careful with the screw. This little tip can get crushed very quickly. And then there's a big problem sometimes, like here, the O-ring is pretty, how should I put it? Well, when it's still so new, sometimes it's a bit hard to press in. That's the case here too, it had to go through the thread. Otherwise, just screw it back in, the right number of turns out. I'll summarize that for you in the video description. Now it's catching here. And then, in this repair kit, we also have this one air nozzle right at the front. I'll show you that at the end now. It's this one right here. You can unscrew it. I'll show you the nozzle as well. Here you go, it's this little one. Of course, I'm going to replace it now. You can do that on your own, it's really no problem at all. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and that it was helpful. If you have any questions or suggestions, don't hesitate, just write something in the comments, I'd be happy to hear from you. Otherwise, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscription from you. I wish you lots of fun and success with your project, and see you in the next video.